Welcome to this editorial meeting. We're looking at highlighting the major news items for the year 2022. I know that specific individuals would have focused on different sectors, and we get the opportunity now to share some of those highlights. And I'll start with you because you focus on the agricultural sector. And we know that things like the Russia-Ukraine war, COVID-19, they would have affected global food prices. So in terms of NGOs, private citizens and companies being able to provide some of those solutions, what are they in terms of the problems that we face here?
Yes, DK. Trinidad and Tobago focused heavily on the agriculture sector this year, especially when it comes to the youth in the sector. They focused a lot on long-term sustainable careers within the sector. As with the Ministry of Youth Development and National Service, their initiative of the Youth Agricultural Homestead Program attracted 1,400 applicants between the ages of 18 and 35. Let me explain further. Minister of MyDNS, Foster Cummings, said his ministry is hoping to advertise for recruits for the program annually and invited this year's unsuccessful applicants to reapply for the next cohort. Each participant received training in crop production and animal husbandry, land, a starter home, technical and financial support. Farmers' complaints about battling crop loss due to flooding, predial larceny, the giant African snail, issues with access to land tenure documents for additional funding, and a substantial increase in the price of animal feed, chemicals, gas, and other necessities continued. However, despite the challenges, agriculture consultant Riyad Mohammed said the sector showed resilience and received a lot of support from the Ministry of Agriculture, Lands and Fisheries, the Agricultural Development Bank, and NAMDEVCO. Minister of Agriculture, Lands and Fisheries Kazim Hussein gave his commitment to continue providing support to the sector.
We are sure, given him and the farming community, whether livestock or the producers of fisheries, whatever they are, I am here to work with them. I spoke to the members of the Agriculture Ministry and they are willing to give me the fullest support. So I can't see that the bottleneck he's speaking about is not going to happen on them.
Mr. Mohammed said the agricultural plan for 2023 will be more private sector driven and noted that several organizations have invested heavily in the sector, the fruits of which will be seen in the next year.
And there was a return to carnival in Trinidad, albeit in pods, but that and other things is something that you're going to be talking about, Keisha Marie.
The onset of the COVID-19 pandemic adversely affected the creative sector as business came to a halt, forcing creatives, including artists, to find diverse ways to survive. The ever-changing local music industry has found ways to evolve in recent times, despite the challenges brought about by the COVID-19 pandemic.
I think the landscape of Trinidad and Tobago music going forward is in really good hands with these artists and behind the scenes music professionals. And yeah, we're just looking forward to what those changes are going to be like in the next 10 years to come.
Several areas of the creative sector were challenged to find innovative ways to persevere with the uncertainty of what lies ahead. But as the country prepares for what is being deemed as the mother of all carnivals in 2023, NCC Chairman Winston Gypsy Peters promises an unforgettable event.
We may not agree on everything, we may not agree on every answer, but the one thing that we can agree on and will always agree on, it is love, and love is at the heart of it. Regardless of how we involve, how we celebrate, or how many times we have lived and relived the experience, ladies and gentlemen, Trinidad and Tobago, and indeed the world, we love carnival.
History was made as Tobago held its very own carnival for the first time ever. As the dynamic creative sector continues to evolve each year, 2022 has taught creatives and entertainers the importance of being diverse. We look ahead to 2023.
But Marie-Therese, you would have focused on the development. This is coming out of especially the Ministry of Digitalization, namely many ministries making that transition to becoming fully computerized. Take us through this year digital transformation.
Of course, DK, it all started at the beginning of the year when the Finance Minister, Colm Imbert, decided that government was going to make decisions based on big data analytics. So let me tell you about it. Many ministries are on the cusp of receiving the expected benefits of moving to computerized environments. Government is expecting to improve the delivery of services to citizens by digitally re-engineering the package of facilities they offer. They want to become more agile as they progress toward a fully cybernated system, a fully digital nation. At the beginning of the year, Finance Minister Colm Imbert declared that the government would use big data analytics to make better decisions. The Ministry of Agriculture, Lands and Fisheries said farmers will gain opportunities.
It's not only digitalization, my colleagues' records at state lands, so that all land matters could be easily accessible and people's files who have been waiting for lease renewal for 40 years into a digital format, and it makes it a little bit easier.
For homeowners, certificates of comfort will be generated faster.
Today, all the agencies responsible for granting permission for land and housing development are linked digitally, thereby reducing the inordinately long waiting time for permissions to be granted. Additionally, because these records and applications are now online, applicants can track the progress of their application.
The Ministry of Education is anticipating less costs. The minister in charge of the immense change for the country's government services summed the process up thus.
One of the beautiful things about digital government is that it is the cheapest form of government that you can have that delivers the highest level of efficiency. So if we don't do that, we'll be spending more, getting less efficiency and frustrating our citizens to a point where it doesn't make sense. We have to do this.
Thanks for that recap, Marie-Therese. And we are focusing on education now, and the COVID-19 pandemic. It would have forced students from across the country to rely on online learning, but that would have changed in 2022, and we're looking to hear about that from you, Mahalia.
You're right, DK. While parents were able to breathe a sigh of relief with the physical resumption of schools earlier this year, for teachers, the issue of school violence prevailed. Here's more.
And based on the advice from the officials of the Ministry of Health, the government of Trinidad and Tobago has taken the decision to fully reopen all schools at the ECCE, primary, secondary and tertiary levels from April 19, 2022.
Dr. Gadsby Dolly said the return to the physical classroom offers students the best chance at success, and added that while some students may have excelled academically with online classes, data from standardized tests showed many suffered during the pandemic.
In 2021, 47% of the students that wrote CSEC in Trinidad and Tobago got their full certificate. 5 subjects including math and English. That's your basic preparation for work at a reasonable standard. That's your basic preparation. 47%. In 2020, it was 55%.
As the school year progressed, videos on social media of school fights were almost the norm. The videos prompted the Ministry of Education to seek help from the Trinidad and Tobago Police, who intervened.
Generally, the schools that get identified, the 17 schools where the police are involved, generally you've had, yes, a decrease in the numbers of violent fights and so on that are taking place. So we are glad for that police involvement, and so it must continue because clearly it is bearing fruit. And it's not just the police presence being a punitive presence, it is the police who are the community police involved in the police youth clubs. So they are engaging the students, speaking to them, encouraging them to join the police youth clubs outside of school. So we see that bearing fruit, and we, of course, want that to continue.
In addition to school fights, there was another video which caught the attention of the nation. The video showed students of the Rosehill RC school lying on the ground as the sound of gunshots were heard outside of their building. On a lighter note, in 2022, the ministry was able to commission new schools to enhance the learning environment for students, like the Fanny Village Government Primary School, the La Pastora ECCE Center, the Santa Flora Government Primary, and the Arima Hindu Primary School.
That's Mahalia. Now, I see I'm the only person who has some water, so let's take a little water break and we come back with more, right? Thank you. We continue breaking down all the major events of this year, the news items, and one of those sectors that remains is the energy sector. So tell us about some of those developments, please, Terry-Ann.
Yes, DK. The tragic deaths of the 4 divers from LMCS Limited who were working on that underwater 30-inch pipeline was one of the saddest moments for the year. At the Commission of Inquiry, the lone survivor's passionate testimony brought many of us to tears.
Everything inside me hoping a rescue was going on. Nobody was making an attempt to rescue me. You know what I mean?
Meanwhile, the greening of the local oil, gas and petrochemical sector has geared up during the year. On the production side, the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries closed its deep water bid round mid-year, with a few bidders being selected for further consideration.
Next 5 years, there are other projects with gas reserves of 3 TCF, which are earmarked for sanctioning. Beyond this period, the mega projects such as Shell's Manatee project, with gas reserves of 2.7 TCF, Woodside's, formerly BHP's Deepwater Calypso project, with gas resources of approximately 6.6 TCF, are due to come on stream.
And the discussions between this country and the major energy producers continued, as in September, Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley traveled with Energy Minister Stuart Young to Europe to meet with executives from Proman, BP and Shell.
By 2050, total global upstream and midstream investments in natural gas are projected to reach $8.7 trillion in response to increase in the global gas trade, and particularly the growth of LNG trade from 365 million tons in 2020 to 800 million tons in 2050.
Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley also highlighted the bunkering project, which will supply Proman Stena and other marine vessels with methanol from either ports at Chagaramas, Port of Spain, Point Lisas or Brighton.
Thanks, Terry. And we'll move towards the health sector now, and I think that 2022 would have been a new dawn with regard to certain things in terms of decline in infections and deaths due to the pandemic, ease in restrictions, and some hard-earned rewards for our healthcare workers. Kimberly, you took the lead on that, so give us a little idea on health this year, please.
Well, DK, as the country battened down for another year of battling the COVID-19 pandemic, a silver lining came in March. What also happened is that we discontinued the Ministry of Health pressers that people had gotten accustomed to. Let's take a look.
There are 173 patients and 0 patients in our step down. And for the first time since April of last year, we have 0 patients in step-down facilities. And this trend has been consistent over the past 10 days or so.
Soon after, Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley announced the removal of safe zones and the limit on public gatherings. Then in April came the full reopening of the economy and the lifting of the remaining COVID-19 public health regulations. The travel pass system was discontinued from June 1st, which saw non-nationals entering the country regardless of their vaccination status. One of the last restrictions to be removed was the mask mandate, which was lifted in July. Soon, the Ministry of Health suspended its daily COVID-19 reporting and weekly COVID-19 health updates. In May, TNT received a shipment of 43,200 doses of the Pfizer COVID-19 pediatric vaccines donated by Spain. Still, while all these events unfolded, news spread that a new infectious virus may be on the rise, monkeypox. However, TNT has since maintained there have been no reports of the virus. The pandemic brought to the fore the very real issue of mental health, and the ministry continued its focus on support services.
The man of the hour, Sunil, has been covering national security, and he's looked at a few things in terms of first 2 weeks of the new year. Murders would have continued, including a triple murder in Sangre Grande. This would have prompted a response from the TTPS, so we hear more about that from him.
Don't be alarmed, even though we are and concerned and treating with it. Things are not out of hand.
But days later, several murders were recorded, including a double murder at South Park Mall in broad daylight. National Security Minister Fitzgerald Hinesdoe said the escalation in gang violence was partly due to the death of a known gang leader near the end of 2021. This led to the police service announcing a major gun retrieval exercise in early May in an effort to reduce the annual average murder rate of 440.
We are told that there are about 12,000 illegal firearms in this country. From intelligence, the gatherers of intelligence surmise that that is the amount. Some of us feel it might be more.
But the escalation in criminality continued with robberies, home invasions and murders. One such incident led to police responding to a quadruple murder along the North Coast in July, following which the Prime Minister spoke out.
I think in Trinidad and Tobago the time has come for us to declare violence as a public health emergency.
By mid-August, the murder toll already stood at 364, with the TTPS under constant pressure due to an increase in violent crimes. Tobago also started to see its own uptick in murders by late September. Murders 5, 6 and 7 recorded within a few days, with at least 2 more in October, days apart. The Prime Minister then announced a critical move via a tax break for citizens to equip their homes with CCTV cameras, while government was also in the process of procuring its own. And in December came the news that scanners at the port were non-functional for some time, drawing concerns that illegal firearms were being filtered through.
We thank you for that, Sunil. Now to the political landscape. There was a shake-up of cabinet in March 2022, and this is after the resignation of the former Minister of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries, Clarence Rambarat. There were elections, there were new developments, eventual turmoil in Tobago, and you're going to be telling us about that, Karen.
Yes, DK. Well, the Prime Minister's second in command since 2015, Faris Al-Rawi, he was reassigned to the Ministry of Local Government and Rural Development to lead the rollout of the local government reform. Now, Dr. Rowley's Attorney-at-Law, Reginald Armour, he was brought into the fold as the new Attorney General. I'll tell you more. Three months into his new assignment, the Attorney General would come under scrutiny by the United National Congress. The UNC called for the AG to resign or be fired after his disqualification from representing TNT in civil proceedings relating to alleged fraud and corruption in the Piarco Airport project. In the month of June, the opposition walked out on the Attorney General in Parliament on at least 9 occasions.
Honourable members, Member for Safaria, honourable members, please leave in silence.
The Prime Minister stood by his Attorney General.
Mr. Armour is not a pick-up side person who was brought into the cabinet as Attorney General.
Mr. Amor is a person of high distinction who functioned in this country as a judge on the bench. And certainly when he was offered the position, the question of him not continuing his business as a practitioner would have been understood and agreed to. And with respect to who I select to put in the cabinet, I take full responsibility for that.
The honeymoon period for Tobago's Progressive Democratic Patriots was over in 9 months, as the party's political leader, Watson Duke, fired his second-in-command, deputy political leader and Chief Secretary Farley Augustine. Mr. Duke had accused the THA of not funding a trip to New York for Labor Day celebrations for the Roxborough Folk performers. Mr. Duke then resigned as the Deputy Chief Secretary of the THA and began a campaign against the THA executive. On December 1, 2022, Chief Secretary Farley Augustine and 15 other assemblymen resigned from the PDP. They vowed to serve their electorate as independent representatives. Other PDP members soon followed. The People's National Movement Tobago Council wants fresh THA elections. They say the people of Tobago did not vote for independent candidates. The PNM Tobago is revising its strategy in the event there is a snap election in a few months.
Really interesting stuff, Karen. Thank you for that. Well, we have a few more items and topics to discuss and cover, but let's take a short break and we'll come back and do them after that. All right, folks, well, I think we're down to the wire now, but the COVID-19 pandemic, it would have proved distressing for many citizens. And the Ministry of Social Development was active as it sought to bridge that gap during the recovery. Now, Stacey Ann, take us through the 2022 in social development. Thank you.
Okay, DK. Well, Line Minister Donna Cox said her ministry continues to reduce poverty through its social assistance grants for the most vulnerable. Now, she said this is why government opted not to remove these grants in the national budget. Let me break it down for you.
So as of September the 23rd, 16,993 individuals are in receipt of public assistance grant. And the total expenditure on this grant was $373,605,000. Instead, the safety net was widened even further by increasing the personal tax allowance now available to citizens from $84,000 annually to $90,000. So that amounts to about 300,000 persons who would have benefited from this.
Keeping in mind that the period of post-pandemic recovery is nowhere near over, just over $5.4 billion was allocated to the ministry to continue its work. In November, another challenge presented when adverse weather caused flooding in several areas of Trinidad. The ministry, as a second responder, was called into action to provide relief to victims. And after 20 years, the Center for Social Displaced Persons at Riverside Car Park in Port of Spain was shut down, having been deemed no longer suitable for the socially displaced. Minister Cox indicated at the closure in September that the CSDP was meant to be a temporary measure for the homeless, and the ministry viewed the closure as an achievement, as they were able to provide better accommodations and assistance for those willing to accept it. And one aspect of the social development sector that warmed many a heart in the past year was seeing the joy of loved ones of newly minted centenarians and those fortunate to add one more year to their 10 decades. The Division of Aging continues to make a concerted effort to ensure our centenarians are celebrated.
Thank you, Stacey Ann. Now, Carrie, I know that you would have focused extensively on the tourism sector this year, and it's no secret that the sector was one of the hardest hit with regard to the pandemic. And getting it going again after it came to a grinding halt is really something that needs some looking at. So break that down for us, thanks.
Definitely, DK.
tourism stakeholders could finally breathe a sigh of relief as the hotels, airlines, cruise ships, and other tourism-based operations were allowed to operate once more. But the government had a heavy feat on their hands. Now, the tourism industry is one which branches out into just about every other sector, as it requires goods and services from the point the ticket is booked to every other step along the way. Long story short, the tourism industry is really important to commerce and foreign exchange, and it was imperative that the powers that be cleared the roadblocks impeding its progress. In comes the tourism ministry, and the word for the year is partnerships.
The Ministry of Tourism, Culture and the Arts is very much active in overseeing the opening of the event sector and the tourism sector here in Trinidad and Tobago. We've been ensuring that there will be a successful and profitable reopening to the sectors by building the capacity of our stakeholders and making investments in the infrastructure and even in particular events and initiatives that were conceived by citizens and organizations here locally.
We also saw a massive recruitment drive by a major cruise ship operator that attracted swaths of local applicants. It was a sight to behold. This initiative would have provided employment for hundreds of nationals.
I am just happy as acting Prime Minister. I am happy that 2,000 of our citizens can now get access to these good jobs.
To the relief of many, we also saw certain airlines return to operate in Trinidad and Tobago, as well as new air routes implemented.
Very, very excited at the fact that we're back in the German market in a real way. And with Condor landing yesterday, it means that, hey, we're welcoming our passengers from the UK, passengers from Germany, international passengers via our cruise ships, and obviously our domestic tourism sector certainly is picking up. So great news for Tobago, great news for tourism in general.
Sticking with Tobago, we were also proud to celebrate the international awards the island has received, which will, no doubt, be a boon to its international tourism market. Considering our current trajectory, the sky seems to be the limit as we segue to the greatest show on earth. Yes, I'm talking about our carnival in 2023.
Thanks, Gary, and it's really something seeing those cruise ships pulling in again. Huh? But we are not done yet because we still have all the key developments that would have been transpiring in Tobago as she becomes more beautiful. And we're very happy to be joined by Carissa Douglas, our resident Tobagonian correspondent, finally in Trinidad, looking like a secretary herself.
Yes, DK. After an action-packed 2021, Tobagonians experienced further excitement with the rollout of various activities, some continuations and others new and ambitious. Allow me to highlight a few.
Early in the game, Tobago saw one of the first bold requests by its leaders within the Tobago House of Assembly, THA. In his maiden budget speech, Chief Secretary Fali Agustin delivered a 6.9% budget, the highest end of the Dispute Resolutions Committee recommendation.
The total draft estimates of expenditure of Assembly Fiscal 2023 amounts to 3.97 billion, of which recurrent expenditure amounts to 3.07 billion and development expenditure to 900 million, URP to 59.59 million and CPEP to 53.17 million.
As part of the more than 80 events on the island for October, Tobago got an opportunity to witness the performance of mega Afrobeat star Burna Boy, though heavy rains and inadequate covering left patrons drenched from head to toe.
Thank you, Carissa. Always a pleasure to see you in person. Lots of great ideas from everyone. Thank you for that. But the proof of the pudding is in the eating, so we need to implement. Teamwork makes the dream work, so it's one thing to do. Let's do it.